Welcome back. So let's talk about Proterozoic glaciation. So we're thinking the first time parts of Earth start to see any glaciers during the Proterozoic. So there are some evidence for glaciation, whether that happened in the near past or the way distant past. One of those is a type of rock called a tillite. Glacial till is any kind of material that kind of gets deposited in an outwash of a glacier. So tillites is a type of conglomerate rock, which is a sedimentary rock, which you get a bunch of random rocks of different sizes, lithifies, turned to this type of conglomerate called a tillite, which is specific of sediment deposited by a glacier. There are at least 300 Precambrian localities where these tillites are located. So tillites are one such pieces of evidence. Another piece of evidence are striations. Striations are like scratches or grooves that result when a large glacier, and glaciers can be miles thick, which is heavy. It takes a large rock or even just a lot of ice, and as that drags along the kind of the basement bedrock of an area, it will leave these scratches, it will leave these grooves, these almost smooth scratches in the rock itself. And the scratch marks are great because they show the direction the glacier was moving. So glaciers move. They all move. That's kind of what they do. So tillite's a type of rock, striations in bedrock, and then drop stones we see as well. We talked about these a little while back. But what we'll see in usually fine-grained, kind of very thin-bedded or very thin laminates of sedimentary rock that indicate deep water deposits of clay and silt, we'll get these much larger chunks of these random rocks that kind of plopped and dropped into this sediment, and then the layers kind of continue to form around it. And that comes from once an iceberg breaks away from a glacier. So if a glacier makes its way out to the ocean, and a chunk of that falls off and floats, that's what an iceberg is, it might have some rocks in it, and as that iceberg kind of melts, any rock that's in it or on it kind of falls into the bottom of the ocean floor and kind of embeds itself in that very fine-grained clay and silt sediment. There was, at least in the Proterozoic, two major episodes based on evidence. There may have been more, but there were two major episodes. That doesn't mean two events, that two kind of chunks of time where glaciation occurred in the Proterozoic. So this is, look at that. It's kind of like, look at that. That's fun. So this shows a couple of things. So this is some tillite, so a bunch of glacial sediment. You can see all the different sizes of material that was lithified, turned to stone. And then down here, you actually see these glacial striations as well. So this is like a 2-for-1 area. This is kind of a very famous geologic location in Norway. More on what Snowball Earth is here in a moment. Here's actually that same location, a little bit older, but again, you can see the tillite here. You can see the striations in those rocks. So tillite, striations, and then drop stones. So you get this very thin-bedded sedimentary rock, and then you get these bigger stones kind of embedded in these very thin silt clay-layered sedimentary rocks. So again, these are drop stones that fell out of icebergs into very, very kind of small-grained sediment, and then as it continued to bury, those layers, kind of formed around it, but you get these random stones kind of plopped there in the middle. So those are all drop stones that indicate icebergs, which break off of glaciers. So those are all your evidence of glaciation. So let's talk about the older Proterozoic glaciation. So there was some widespread glaciation during the Paleoproterozoic. Tillites are some evidence of that. We see some up in Michigan, up in Canada. We see it also over in Europe as well. And here's what we see. So here's some early Proterozoic, Paleoproterozoic glacial deposits. So we see these tillite deposits, and we can date them. And then from there, we can't necessarily date the sedimentary rock, but if the drop stones themselves are igneous and metamorphic, we can date those. So we see evidence of tillites. So there was some sort of glaciation going on. Again, this far back, it's hard to really put the whole picture together, especially at the beginning of the Proterozoic. Again, we're talking a couple of billion years ago. But more recent glaciation is a lot easier to kind of put all the pieces together. And then let's fast forward to the Neoproterozoic, so about a billion to half a billion years ago. It's reported that the glaciation during the Neoproterozoic was the most extensive in Earth's history. If you think back to our previous section on supercontinents, remember that in the Neoproterozoic we had the kind of formation and breakup of Rodinia, as well as the formation and breakup of Pannotia. And that may have played a part, right? And that may have played a part in this widespread glaciation that we see happening in the Neoproterozoic. During the glaciation wasn't continuous at this entire time, but it was episodic with kind of 4 different episodes. So we had this big chunk of glaciation in the Paleoproterozoic. Now we get this big chunk in the Neoproterozoic, but it was kind of broken up. It wasn't continuous over the whole time. And it was so extensive that we may have even had glaciers near equatorial areas. The equator, it's hot around the equator. It receives the most energy from the sun. Therefore, it's the hottest places on Earth for the most part. But due to climate and the changes in the geosphere and the atmosphere and the hydrosphere, it may have been so cold that, again, even glaciers were at the equators. The actual extent of glaciers is unknown. Again, this old of stuff, it's hard to put every piece together, but we do have tillites and other glacial features ranging from about 900 to about 600 million years old. And they're found actually on all continents except for Antarctica, at least what we can find on Antarctica right now. So this is the extent of, at least the evidence we have now, of Neoproterozoic glaciation. So we have evidence in all of these areas. And so one interesting hypothesis, remember, hypothesis is an educated guess. It's not a theory. That's the highest level of knowing. So one interesting hypothesis is that during this Neoproterozoic, there was something called Snowball Earth. There you have it, Snowball Earth. It sounds just like what you can imagine. The whole Earth was covered in ice. The whole Earth was covered in ice. And so again, this happened in the Neoproterozoic. And again, may have been corresponding to the supercontinents. Rodinia and Pannotia are kind of right in between. Again, the geosphere affects the hydrosphere, affects the atmosphere, so on and so forth. So, some geologists, again, it's just a hypothesis. It's not kind of set in stone, no pun intended. Some geologists think that glaciers covered all land and all seas and created a frozen snowball Earth. Again, it's still a hypothesis, and it's, controversial, and it's being debated. More evidence, more information is needed. That's how science works. We're not poo-pooing it yet. It just needs some more information. The initial information they have is that there's perhaps a series of 3 glaciations during kind of this Neoproterozoic, and it may have been caused by the near equatorial location of the continents. Now, when Rodinia formed, if you remember back in the previous unit, that was kind of more centered right around the equator, right? Laurentia was kind of the center of it, tilted on its side, and everything was kind of right around it. So maybe the near equatorial location of the continents changed the hydrosphere, which changed the atmosphere, which could have triggered an ice age, especially as Rodinia was, forming and or breaking up. So again, evidence for these glaciations ranged from about 900 to 600 million years ago. The lowering of carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere that was occurring during the Proterozoic. We'll talk more about that, I believe, next section when we go into the atmosphere. With little CO2, because CO2 is a greenhouse gas, if we have less of that in the atmosphere, that means the climate's going to get cooler. So with little CO2, glaciers would form more easily because it's cooler. And glaciers, by nature of their color, another thing they do is they help to reflect even more energy. So since glaciers are white essentially, and what the white surfaces do is they're reflecting. White reflects more sunlight than a dark surface. That's why, during the summer it's better to wear white than black, because a black shirt absorbs all that sunlight, absorbs all that energy, making you warmer. White colors, white shirts actually reflect more of that light. All right, so if you see someone wearing a white shirt, it might be bright because more sunlight is reflecting off of that shirt. And so you're actually staying cooler in a white shirt because more energy is being reflected. Well, same with Earth. If the whole thing's a snowball covered in ice, then you have more of that sunlight, instead of being absorbed by the Earth and helping to heat the Earth, it's being reflected back into space, also helping to make it cooler. So less CO2, more ice, all of that's helping to continue to grow glacial ice and make it even colder. But, volcanic activity would continue. Volcanic activity, one of the main things it pumps out is gas, CO2, and other greenhouse gases are a main component of that, which would then warm the atmosphere and help to end the glacial episodes. One criticism of Snowball Earth hypotheses is, well, how would life survive? Remember, at this time, and we'll go over this in another section, the biosphere, what's going on with life in the Proterozoic. We just have some stuff swimming around the ocean, that primordial soup type stuff. Towards the end of the Proterozoic and the Neoproterozoic, we start to get multi-celled life, and we actually start to get animals. So if that's the case, but if the whole Earth is a big snowball, how would life survive? Life doesn't really like cold too much. So maybe life persisted down at those hydrothermal vents, right, that I had mentioned before, down on the seafloor. Perhaps photosynthesis can take place still, continue under thin glacial ice. So maybe those cyanobacteria, those photosynthetic cyanobacteria that make stromatolites, maybe if the ice is thin enough, that process can still occur. Maybe they could still survive. Maybe there's little lakes under glaciers that for some reason some cold resistant bacteria survived in there and persisted. Or, there's still volcanoes. Those are still happening. Those are still warm. Maybe there's pools of water near volcanoes that were warmed up and life persisted in there. So again, still a hypothesis. So again, carbon dioxide dropping, making the planet cooler. In fact, much cooler, 50 degrees cooler. That's a lot. Again, to me, that's a big stretch. That's a big stretch. But hey. So then you start to get Snowball Earth glaciation, but volcanic eruptions pumping more CO2, making it warm, and etc., etc. So kind of into Snowball Earth and out of, and perhaps back into it with ice at the poles. So this is Pannotia. So maybe it was covered in ice. Maybe the whole Earth was covered in ice. Maybe just the poles were covered in ice. With Pannotia as well, it happens so quickly that the 100% certainty and details of Pannotia and what it was and where it was and how it worked is still kind of thin. And in fact, the evidence for this wasn't really kind of discovered for Pannotia. It wasn't really discovered until I think the 80s or something, something like that. So it's, the idea of Pannotia and the evidence of it is still relatively new, right? But and Pannotia happened for such a short period of time. I would venture to say that, yeah, probably Pannotia was probably covered in ice. Was the whole Earth covered in ice? That's a good hypothesis. There's some interesting evidence. I just need to see more. I can't say no, can't say yes. That's a scientist. So, but all of this kind of, again, where the continents are plays a part. That's the geosphere, plays a part in the hydrosphere, that's the water, and the hydrosphere plays a part in the atmosphere. So let's go ahead and pause here, and when we come back, we'll talk about the evolving atmosphere of the Proterozoic. See you back here in just a second.